The stories we are following this hour: North Korea commemorates the second anniversary of former leader Kim Jong-il's death and celebrates the current strongman Kim Jong-un's accession to power. A nationwide railway strike reaches its 9th day, partially affecting subway services in Seoul and the surrounding areas of Gyeonggi Province. More disruptions are expected as additional workers will walk out starting Wednesday morning. Plus, rising tensions between China and the U.S. Beijing dispatches 40 fighter jets to South China Sea following a tense maritime standoff between the two sides earlier this month. With these stories and more, next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Tuesday, December 17th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening in North Korea, where the country commemorated the second anniversary of former leader Kim Jong-il's death and marked the first day of Kim Jong-un's third year as the nation's leader. With
the event coming just days after the shocking purges and executions of high-level officials, all eyes were on the seating arrangements, looking for clues about who will be the key players of the regime in the near future. Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has our top story.
It appears North Korea's military Politburo chief Choi Ryong-hae has replaced Kim Jong-un's executed uncle Chang Song-taek as the state's second most powerful man. As many had expected, the bureaucrat-turned-military official was seated right next to Kim Jong-un during a national ceremony marking the second anniversary of the death of Kim Jong-il, where he pledged allegiance to the North's young leader.
We revolutionary forces will honor no one else but our great leader, Kim Jong-un. We will protect our one and only supreme commander through all the hardships.
Choi's seat was one seat closer to Kim Jong-un than at last year's ceremony, signaling a promotion. Speculation is also rife that Choi, who was known to be a military hardliner, was one of the main figures behind the expulsion and execution of Chang, who was a moderate. Next to Choi were Chief of the General Staff of the Korean People's Army Lee Young-gil and Minister of the People's Armed Forces Chang Jong-nam. To Kim Jong-un's right was Kim Yong-nam, the president of the Presidium of the Supreme People's Assembly and the nominal second in command, who got the ceremony started with a keynote speech. Prime Minister Park Bong-ju, who is in charge of North Korea's economic reform plans, was seated next to him. Despite concerns that more Chang Song-taek followers would be purged, some of his former aides were present at the ceremony. But Kim Kyung-hee, Chang's wife, and the daughter of the state founder Kim Il-sung was absent, presumably for health reasons. Although Kim Jong-un's wife Lee Seol-ju also didn't take part, she did make an appearance with Kim Jong-un at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, where the bodies of North Korean founder Kim Il-sung and his son Kim Jong-il lie in state. It was Lee's first public appearance since October. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
And meanwhile, back here in the South, Seoul's Defense Minister Kim Gan-jin has ordered the South Korean military to be on full alert against any possible provocations from the North.
During a meeting with the nation's military commanders on Tuesday, Kim said there is a high chance of North Korean provocations during the period between late January to early March next year. In a separate development, Saenuri Party lawmaker Cho Won-jin said in a special parliamentary meeting that the North is showing signs it could attempt another long-range missile launch and a fourth nuclear test, citing signs of expansion in its nuclear test site and missile launch facility. And for an expert's take on what we can read into today's memorial ceremony for Kim Jong-il, we connect live to Dr. Kim Chul-woo, Senior Research Fellow at Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Dr. Kim, what was the most distinct feature of today's ceremony compared to last year's that you found noteworthy?
Against the backdrop of that shocking execution of Jang Sung-taek, obviously the focus has shifted strongly back to the glorification of Kim Jong-un. On top of that, we can aware the new features of today's second ceremony. Number one is the obviously Chae-yong's positioning and the new seating arrangement of all the incumbent and the new faces of that head table. And secondly, Kim Kyung-il's absence, unlike yesterday's luster of the ceremony of the former party control head. And the other thing is, interests me enough, there has been no remarks on nuclear weapons at all at this time. Last year, they made a big announcement and admiration of their nuclear weapons. And the other thing is the overall atmosphere of clapping style in machine like high-level uprights, uniform like a clapping style of all attendees. Probably they are already fully aware of the Jang Sung-taek's clapping style was problematic. The other thing is Kim Jong-un's stone-like face, and it seems to me very uncomfortable and unstable feature of his body language. It was conspicuous enough to be seen by the audiences.
Well, if the state's second most powerful man is now a military hardliner as opposed to a moderate economic reformer, what changes can we expect to see?
Yes, that's problematic because the new emerging power Chae-yong, all the emerging power of the military side, most of them hardliners have to likely to show off his allegiance to the central figure of Kim Jong-un, which could be very dangerous diversionary provocations or instigations to, the blackmail or actually actual attack of any kind of provocations against South Korea. That's very problematic because with that, military hardliners can prove with actions rather than rhetorical allegiance. So that could be problematic enough to the South Korean national security.
Well, South Korea's defense minister expects a provocation in a matter of months. Now, will it be a routine song and dance, or should we take this more seriously than before?
Like President Park Geun-hye urges readiness against the possible North Korean provocations, and Minister Kim Kwan-jin's, kind of alert in advance could be a strategic communication, strategic message toward North Korean hardliners. But it's likely we are fully ready to whatever possible, provocations by North Korea. I think the North Koreans' provocations will be very strange enough this time because, unlike the traditional way of provocations like a nuclear bomb testing or the Yeonpyeong Island provocations, shelling, or those kind of stuff is unlikely. So they can probably, implement new North Korean style of provocations. So that's why we have to fully ready very strange provocations toward South Korea. That's why we are fully aware of those possible, creative enough provocations against South Korea.
All right, Dr. Kim Cho-do, Senior Research Fellow at Korea Institute for Defense Analyses, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Now we turn to the second of our three-part series on Kim Jong-un's accomplishments during his 2 years in power.
Tonight, our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee looks at how far the country's economic reforms have come under Kim's reign and where they are headed.
When the young North Korean leader Kim Jong-un assumed power 2 years ago, he made a bold statement to move toward economic reform.
There must be economic development for Kim Jong-un to receive more support from the North Korean public. In that sense, North Korea is attempting economic development that it can achieve by itself, despite all the international sanctions.
One way to do that was to establish 14 special economic zones across 9 regions in the state, opening up the reclusive regime to foreign investors. But because the now executed uncle of the young Kim, Jang Sung-taek, was a key player in the plan along with North Korean Premier Park Bong-ju, Experts say Chang's removal may put the brakes on the drive to reform.
Park Bong-ju lost his big partner in the North Korean politics. That means probably the hardliners in Korean Workers' Party and North Korean military authorities, they will raise their pressure against new economic reform and any kind of open-up policy.
Another ambitious project to rake in foreign currency is the construction of the Basingnyeong ski resort, which is estimated to have cost the ailing state $400 million. The park is expected to open for business by the end of this year, but experts are skeptical about Pyongyang's ability to open up due to its constant provocations and nuclear threats.
Such efforts to open up must be backed by an easing of international sanctions and an improvement in North Korea's image to the outside world. It is foolish of the North to think that it can attract foreigners just by building tourist sites.
The recent detainments of American tourists will also work against the North's attempts to attract foreigner tourism. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And over now to tensions in the South China Sea. China has dispatched 40 fighter jets to the area, seemingly in response to a standoff earlier this month between a Chinese and U.S. warship. Our Yu Dian has the details.
China has dispatched 40 of its Gen 10 fighter jets to the South China Sea, according to a Chinese military paper on Tuesday. The move is widely perceived as an attempt to prevent additional standoffs with the United States in international waters. The United States over the weekend revealed that one of its warships was approached by a Chinese Navy ship last month in the South China Sea. Despite radio warnings, the U.S. says the Chinese vessel did not stop, forcing the U.S. ship to take evasive action just 450 meters from collision. The incident underscores the rising tensions between China and the U.S. following Beijing's newly declared air zone further north in the East China Sea. It's also prompted Washington to defend its right to sail freely in international waters and to raise a formal protest against China through both diplomatic and military channels. China has yet to issue a formal statement on the near collision. China lays claim to most of South China Sea, including ones also claimed by neighboring countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. Yu Dian, Arirang News.
Entrepreneurship. Now, that's President Park Geun-hye would like to see more of it from the nation's largest companies when they make investments. She told them as much on Tuesday in a face-to-face meeting. Our presidential office correspondent, Oh Jin-ju, reports.
Economic revitalization and job creation were two of President Park's key goals for the latter half of this year. What is important now is keeping the domestic economy on the track to recovery. President Park on Tuesday attended a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new headquarters of the Federation of Korean Industries, where she met with top business leaders and called for entrepreneurship.
여러분이 기업가 정신으로 투자하고 도전하신다면 정부는 적극 뒷받침을 해 드릴 것입니다.
She said that preemptive investments made during hard times were what enabled Korea to overcome various crises in the past and helped it to create new opportunities. President Park said if economic recovery is the short-term goal, enhancing the fundamentals of the Korean economy is the long-term one. She then urged these companies to take the lead in realizing a creative economy, highlighting just how important a shift in the nation's economic paradigm is. President Park also put great emphasis on shared growth between large and small companies. How? She called for a new business ecosystem, one that combines the resources and experiences of large enterprises and the ideas and creativity of SMEs. The president also asked conglomerates to focus on the global market, as there are a variety of sectors in which to cooperate with SMEs.
요 국내 시장만을 볼 것이 아니라 세계가 우리 시장이다. 이렇게 생각을 해야만 성공하고 발전할 수 있는 시대에 살고 있습니다.
President Park suggested conglomerates give away patents they don't use to smaller firms and seek technological cooperation from them. Ju, Arirang News.
Turning to the latest on the nationwide rail strike that is now into its 9th day. The mass walkout, which has mainly affected freight services until now, has now started to impact passenger train services, including KTX express trains and subway services in Seoul. The union representing workers of Seoul Metro says it will join the strike starting Wednesday. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Police raided the offices of the Korea Railroad Corporation's labor union in Seoul on Tuesday morning, taking away documents and computer hard drives. Hundreds of police officers lined up on the street outside to quell any possible unrest. Authorities also tried to enforce arrest warrants that were issued on Monday for 10 union members, but they were blocked by crowds of union members from gaining access to them. The strike has now set a record by going 9 days. It's starting to take a toll on railway services nationwide. The Korea Railroad Corporation, or KORAIL, reduced its operations of KTX express trains by 12% on Tuesday for the first time since the strike began. Subway services were scaled down 7% on Monday, directly affecting commuters who are having to wait longer than usual.
With the disruption to train services, I was late to my classes and meetings. It's been very annoying.
Due to the railroad strike, I'm seeing more traffic congestion during the rush hours, which is delaying my arrival at work.
And the prospect for further reductions in the number of KTX and Seoul Metro trains in the coming days raises the possibility for more disruptions for passengers.
Union members of Seoul Metro lines 1 through 4 announced that they'll join the limited strike starting Wednesday. The union said it will keep the minimum number of workers on the job needed to keep trains running. Striking workers are demanding the government reverse its plans to set up a new rail operator, which they claim is a first step toward privatization. The government and police call it an illegal strike and say they'll follow the letter of the law in dealing with it. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
In other news, in its quest to wind down unprofitable international operations, General Motors announced plans to withdraw production in Australia and drop its Chevrolet brand in Europe. It's left many wondering how much Korea, which has established itself as one of GM's main production hubs, will be affected by the global restructuring. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
The sustained strength of the Aussie dollar against almost all major trading currencies, the relatively high cost of production, and the relatively small scale of the local domestic market.
Those are the reasons cited by General Motors last week for ending its manufacturing operation in Australia by 2017. The worry is Korea faces the same negative factors in a milder form. For now, Korea accounts for about 1/10 of GM's global auto output and is responsible for developing its small cars, including the Spark. Industry analysts say, however, the recent GM move is a wake-up call for Korea, as the country is not an exception for GM's global restructuring.
Considering Korea's strong local currency, high cost, and relatively small domestic market, GM Korea's labor union and suppliers must spur on their efforts to improve productivity.
Already, GM Korea was hit by the U.S. automaker's decision late last year to scale back on the Korean production of its compact car Cruise in the future. Korea is currently a major production base for Cruise, but the compact model won't be built here when GM introduces its next generation model. On top of that, GM's announcement this month to phase out sales of Chevrolet vehicles in Europe by 2016 was a major blow to the Korean unit. That's because GM Korea produces about 90% of the Chevy automobiles sold in Europe, or as much as 1/5 of its total output. In the short term, Korea will remain as the U.S. auto giant's main production and development center for small cars, but its future will depend on its productivity and price competitiveness. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
The global economy may be in for a long, slow recovery, but some economists fear that Korea's climb back up may be really long, as in similar to Japan's decades-long slump.
But is Japan's past comparable to Korea's future? To offer insight, we now welcome Dr. Shin Se-don, professor of economics at Sungmyeong Women's University, in the studio. Good evening.
My honor.
Well, Professor, why are economists concerned that Korea is going to look like Japan from the 1990s?
Well, two countries have been suffering from long extended years of economic slow growth, sluggishness. And also two countries are suffering, so to speak, from a very rapid, the aging community. And two countries are competing fiercely in the global market because many of the commodities they are selling in the market overlapping in the sense that similar products are. So in many respects, Korea seems to be similar, at least in appearance.
Well, everyone around the world seems to be in the same boat when it comes to slow growth. But why would it be likely that Korea will trail behind when others pick up?
Because, apparently Korea and Japan seems to be very similar ethnically, culturally, economically, but deeper into looking to the economic facts, Japan is much wealthier and have a very broad ground of technology advantage. And so in some respects, I think, Japan is rather superior than Korea, especially in external assets. Japan is pretty rich in the global market in financial investment.
And yet I believe you still do remain hopeful about Korea's future. Where are Korea's economic fundamentals starkly different from Japan's?
First, the government debts. Japan's government debts is over 200% of her GDP, and Korea, well, depending upon the definition of government debt, but it is never over 50%. So fiscal soundness is one advantage for Korea. Second advantage is the strategy of the government. Japan, even though Japan is the strongest power in international trade, the degree of openness is, never more than 40%. But in the case Korea, the degree of openness is almost 100%. So Korea is more oriented to raise. So I think that's going to be a basic difference between Japan and Korea.
So what should Korea do to make sure it doesn't repeat Japan's costly mistakes?
Well, in Japan, especially after Prime Minister Abe, they are kind of following the full-fledged recovery policies, such as putting a lot of money into the system and also putting a lot of government investment. So entire economic recovery in Japan is government-oriented. But in Korea, under the leadership of President Park, we had a little different approach in the sense that at the center of President Park's policy, there's the people's creativeness, and the individual private enterprises' creativeness. So we could call it the spirit of business or entrepreneurship. And that is basically one of the main difference between Japan's approach and Korea. So the people and their creativeness and also the happiness and the hope.
And that smart approach may make the critical difference. Thank you so much for your insight tonight.
My pleasure. Okay.
Today was a typical winter day here in Korea, but apparently some places in the east and south of the country are seeing snow showers at this hour.
For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, which regions be the most affected and how much snow are we looking at?
Good evening, guys. Well, a heavy snowfall watch has been issued on the mountains in Gangwon-do province and Jeju. Now, the mountains in Gangwon-do may get over 25 centimeters of snow, whereas mountains of Jeju are forecast to get about 5 to 15 centimeters. Other than that, the winter weather advisory is in effect throughout Gangwon-do and the mountains of Gyeongsang-Bukdo province, which will see 3 to 8 centimeters. Now, taking a look at the current conditions, as you can see, it is cloudy across the map, and the southern regions are getting some snow showers at this hour due to a low pressure trough. So it looks like the east coast regions are going to get a lot of snow due to cold easterly winds. Temperature-wise, we should continue to have seasonal average temps through tomorrow before things take a dip starting Thursday. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul's morning low should remain the coldest at -3 degrees with a high of 5. Meanwhile, cities down south make it to 8. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju reach 6 and 9 degrees respectively. Meanwhile, Mount Kumgang peaks at -6. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Yuji Hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.